He and Rayton had switched places, and Rayton was ready to throw the spirit spear. Just before doing so, Rayton informed Vorden about something. With the use of MC cells from both Logan and Sia, Vorden right now had one of the strongest support abilities out there. What they found out was, now with a higher level of support ability came more options. Sia's ability limited her to creating only one spear at a time. This limit was still there, even with the increase in power, but there were a couple of differences. More MC cells could be put into the spirit spear, creating a more powerful spear. How long or what the effects were, they couldn't tell until the spear was thrown. Once they obtained this information, Vorden felt like it was best to create a stronger spear, one as strong as possible. They might only have one chance at this. The more powerful the attack when using an ability, the more MC cells it would use. As he continued to watch from above, his heart started to sink. A strange feeling came over him, while beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. The beast had gone into rage mode, but that wasn't the reason Vorden was worried. It was because there was something else down there with them that had brought back bad memories. Fex, who was leaning up against one of the buildings, was no longer there, or at least was no longer himself. Instead, the sight of what was known as a Bloodsucker was there instead. It looked nearly identical to the time he had faced Quinn back on the Red Portal planet. There were a few differences, but the horrifying creature brought back memories. That day, Syl had saved his life, fighting against the Bloodsucker, and in his place, Ian was killed. When Quinn was the beast, there was no telling friend from foe. Vorden had kept silent so far, not wanting to reveal his position to the beast, but as he saw the Bloodsucker moving towards Quinn, he needed to shout out. "Quinn, behind you!" Vorden shouted. Quinn had his eyes set ahead, looking at the beast. He was also concerned about Logan, who had been hit, but hearing the worry in Vorden's voice, he knew it was urgent. As he turned his head, he could see a bald, muscle-bound creature. The claws on its hands had widened. If it wasn't for the clothes that it was wearing, Quinn would never have known it was Fex. "What is that?" Quinn said. "Is it some type of vampire transformation?" As he looked into Fex's eyes, there was no longer any white in them. It was completely black. No emotion was felt by them. "Is he even still sane?" "Don't you remember?" the system said. "He has turned into a Bloodsucker." After hearing the system say those words, Quinn briefly remembered when he hadn't consumed blood for a few days. His transformation had begun. A message appeared before his mind went to black, saying his transformation into a Bloodsucker had been completed. "Did he do this willingly?" Quinn asked. "Perhaps for a vampire to turn into a Bloodsucker, they must have an immense amount of thirst," the system explained. "My guess is, when he was wounded by the beast, he suppressed his healing abilities, allowing the blood to continue to drain from his body. When enough blood had poured out, he allowed his body to heal, using the last bit of his energy. Once the healing process was completed and his powers had been used, his thirst was at its maximum. It's a risky thing to do if you allow too much blood to leave your body and your wounds weren't able to heal, then it could be life-threatening. I'm surprised this young boy knew how to do such a thing. Vampires aren't often taught this, since a Bloodsucker doesn't even see its kind as a friend, which would suggest he is an important figure, perhaps the son of one of the vampire's heads." Although the explanation was interesting for Quinn, he didn't have much time to think about it. Right now he was stuck between the two of them. On one side was the raged king-tier beast, and the other a Bloodsucker. Quinn didn't know which one was more troublesome. When Quinn turned into a Bloodsucker, all his stats were doubled, but his health decreased and he was unable to use his vampire skills. He looked to his left, he looked to his right, waiting for one of them to make their first movement. At the same time, the Bloodsucker and beast dashed forward. "Damn it, Shadow Cloak!" Quinn said. From his feet, the shadow rose, and suddenly Quinn had vanished from their sight. However, it didn't seem like either one of them was interested in him. As Quinn hurried to escape from the area, the two of them clashed in the center of the street. The Bloodsucker swiped its claw, while the beast threw out its balded arm. As the two clashed, the power between the two of them was so strong, it looked as if ripples were being created in the air. At first, Quinn wanted to go check up on Logan and pull him off to the side to see if he was okay. But when he looked at where Logan was last seen, he was no longer there. Peter had already dragged his body from the street and brought him over to the two girls, although they didn't have to do much. Logan had already removed the helmet part of his suit, His mouth had blood trickling down from the side. The miniature robotic spiders were working away, patching him up here and there. They could fix the external wounds, but not the internal ones. It was clear Logan could no longer fight. Instead of going over to where the others were, while the other two were busy fighting, Quinn decided to stay quite close to the fight. He was learning a lot from the fight. While watching, their speed was so great, Quinn couldn't keep up. To the others, they were nearly unable to see anything, apart from once in a while, when there would be a standoff of power. As the fight continued, Quinn was able to see each attack made by the two of them. Although they looked wild and random, as attacks came rushing out from both of them, it looked like it wasn't the case at all. A lot of Fex's original martial arts moves were still involved, and the beast, too, was picking its spots carefully, making it tricky for Fex to get a clean strike in. One thing was clear, though. If Quinn was to fight either one of them the way he was now, he would be in an instant. Still, he chose to stay close, since learning from the fight wasn't the only reason. In the back of his mind, there was one thing he kept thinking about: the quest. The reward of the quest would help him grow in the future. Not only did Quinn want the experience points for King-tier beast, but he also wanted the quest reward. Most likely, if Quinn wasn't the one to deal the finishing blow, it wouldn't count the quest as completed. While the beast was in its rage mode, there was only one attack that could do any type of damage, and that was the blood hammer. The only question was how. How would he get the last hit? The fight continued between the Bloodsucker and the King-tier beast. At first, when the two of them fought, it looked fairly even between them. Neither one of them was getting significantly hurt by the other. This was good for Fex. When a vampire turns into a Bloodsucker, their health, or in Quinn's case HP, decreases. Their wounds would also no longer heal. It was a starved state for vampires, a mode that allowed them to grow stronger to consume blood, but also acted as a double-edged sword. However, slowly one of them was starting to get an edge, and it looked like it was the Bloodsucker. Quinn was starting to notice that the power and the speed of the King-tier beast were finally starting to slow down. The beast had been in combat with multiple opponents, and multiple times, so it made sense to Quinn, but this wasn't the reason why. It had an inhuman amount of stamina, and could continue to fight the students for hours on end. The reason why it was starting to slow down and weaken was because of its rage mode. Simply put, the crystal inside was drawing out more power than it could generate, and now the beast was slowly dying. Not understanding what was happening, Quinn felt like this was his chance to attack. Whatever happened, he needed to get that last hit. He had used most of his MC points during the fight, and right now, the only skill he could use was the Shadow Cloak, which he used to hide his presence.
Hi, Quinn here. Wondering what happens next? If you want to jump the queue and unleash all episodes, click on the link here and install the Pocket FM app.